Hello, thank you for listening to our podcast. We're going to be discussing how dating has evolved over time. We're going to break down how American culture has evolved and how it still shapes our lives today. I'm your host, Ace.
And I'm Christian. Today's episode is called Love, Then and Now, Dating Culture from 1900 to 2020. We're going to talk about how romantic relationships have changed over time, from formal courtships and handwritten letters to ghosting and swiping left.
Exactly. This topic hits home for both of us because relationships are something almost everyone thinks about. But not everyone realizes how much culture, history, and technology shape the way we date. This project gave us the chance to really dig into the history behind it and connect it to stuff we've discussed in class, like societal norms, gender roles, and communication.
So let's dive in. We'll start by rewinding all the way to the early 1900s, before dating even existed as we know it. Starting with segment 1, Courtship and the Birth of Dating. In the early 1900s, people didn't date, they courted. Courting meant that if a guy was interested in a girl, he'd go to her house and hang out with her family, not just her. Marriage was the goal from the beginning, and everything was supervised.
Yeah, there wasn't much room for fun or privacy, but around the 1920s, dating started to become its own thing, especially in cities. According to Dauntless.org, dating originally began in lower class urban communities and slowly spread upward. It was about going out to places like movie theaters and dance halls. It became more social, less formal.
And instead of being about finding a life partner right away, it was about having fun, and for many teens, showing off their popularity. That's when things like the campus rating complex came in, where guys were judged by their looks and money, and girls by how many popular boys they dated.
It's wild how even back then, social status and appearances were already shaping how people dated. But like most things back then, everything changed after World War II. Moving on to segment 2, dating in the 1940s, rules and roles. The 1940s were a turning point. The war changed people's priorities. Marriage became more urgent. Young couples got married faster, sometimes before soldier even went off to war.
And after the war, society pushed hard for traditional values. The media and schools used mental hygiene films to teach teenagers how to behave. We're talking about movies like Dating Do's and Don'ts and Are You Popular, made by Coronet Films.
These films had super strict gender roles. Boys had to ask the girl out, pay for the date, meet her parents, and behave like a gentleman. Girls were supposed to be polite, pretty, and passive.
Basically, men led and women followed. It sounds outdated now, but a lot of people felt safe with those clear expectations.
Yeah, and some of those behaviors, like being respectful, dressing well, and giving compliments, are still seen as signs of a good partner today.
Also, back then, people took going steady seriously. Even if you were only 15, it was like a practice marriage. You'd exchange rings or jackets and treat the relationship as exclusive.
Most of what we've talked about so far has centered on mainstream dating culture in the 20th century, especially what we saw in the 1940s educational films. But we also wanted to take a moment to address that those films, oh, sorry, to address what those films didn't show. The experience of people of color, especially during the Great Depression and World War II era.
According to the Library of Congress, race relations in the 1930s and 40s were defined by legal segregation, discrimination, and violence. Black Americans lived in a completely different social reality than the one portrayed in middle-class white media. While white teens in films we watched were going on dates and exchanging class rings, many black teens were facing Jim Crow laws, unequal schools, and limited access to public space.
And that affected dating too. For example, many parks, theaters, and dance halls were segregated or completely off limits to black people. That means even the act of going out on a date was restricted. Love still happened, but it happened under pressure, in a society that made simple things like holding hands in public an act of quiet resistance.
And interracial dating, practically unheard of in public. It was not only taboo, but it was also often illegal. Anti-miscegenation laws were still in effect in many states during this time, criminalizing relationships between people of different races. This wasn't just about personal preference, it was enforced by law and violence.
So while white teens were watching films about how to be polite on dates, Black teens and other people of color were navigating a world that was literally built to keep them out of public love stories. That kind of exclusion impacts more than just dating. It affects identity, confidence, and a person's ability to imagine a future.
What's also important is how people resisted. Even in the face of racism, Black Americans built their own vibrant culture scenes through music, church communities, and private social events. These were places where love and connection could thrive away from the eyes of discrimination.
And that's something we don't see in most history textbooks. The narrative around dating in the 1940s is usually shown as one thing, clean cut, white, and idealized. But the full story is more complex and honestly more powerful.
So, when we look at how dating culture has changed, we have to also recognize who was excluded from the norm and how those communities still created love, family, and connection despite the odds.
Because love isn't just about following the rules, it's about surviving them, challenging them, and finding your own way forward. On to segment 3, traditional gender roles and the post-war era. The 1950s pushed hard on the nuclear family ideal. Husbands worked, wives stayed home. That's what was seen as normal. The article from Our Everyday Life explained that during the war, women had to work because men were away. But after the war, a lot of women were expected to just go back to being housewives.
And while some did, others didn't want to give up their independence. That caused tension in a lot of marriages. But since divorce was rare and birth control was limited, people often stayed together even if things weren't perfect.
That's why dating in that era was so serious. It led to early marriages and bigger families. But even then, many couples were silently struggling with their roles.
Moving on to segment 4, cultural shifts and new challenges. By the 1960s and 70s, things started changing. The civil rights movement, feminism, and birth control pills gave people, especially women, more freedom. Dating became more casual and traditional rules began to fade.
People explored different kinds of relationships. The idea of free love became popular, and so did living together before marriage. Religion and culture still played a role, but there was more room for personal choice.
And media began showing more diverse relationship styles. The strict, idealized version of love from the 1940s just didn't match what people were actually going through anymore.
Segment 5, entering the digital age. And then came the internet. Dating changed fast. Online dating sites like Match.com and later apps like Tinder and Bumble totally rewrote the rules.
But it's not all good. A Psychology Today article explained how modern dating often leads to insecurity, low self-esteem, and confusion. Apps make it feel like a game, and people start seeing others as disposable.
We also read about how online behavior creates toxic habits like ghosting and orbiting, and also breadcrumbing. All these weird terms are ways people avoid responsibility and communication.
The Pew Research Center found that phones are now a major distraction in relationships. 51% of people said their partner often gets distracted by their phone, and 23% feel insecure because of what their partner does on social media. And the line between public and private is super blurry now. 53% of people have checked up on someone they used to date, and nearly 70% say it's not okay to go through your partner's phone, but 34% admitted they've done it anyway. Moving on to segment 6, script theory. Why dating feels so messy. One of the most helpful things we found was script theory from Psychology Today. It says that people follow scripts to make sense of dating based on culture, personal experience, and internal thoughts.
In the 1940s, the script was clear. Men pursue, women follow, and the goal is marriage. Today, everyone's trying to write their own script, but nobody agrees on what it should be.
That's why modern dating feels so confusing. Some people still want old school romance, others want freedom and flexibility, and most of us are stuck somewhere in between.
Segment 7, Modern Dating at UTRGV. We also wanted to see how students here at UTRGV are dealing with this. One of our UTRGV sources, Love is a Battlefield, from the Writer newspaper, talks about a speed dating event held on campus. It showed how students are still trying to find love, even if it's awkward and nerve-wracking. Another article, Deleting Relationships in the Digital World, explores how people break up online. So ghosting, blocking, unfollowing. Relationships don't just end in person anymore, they're completely deleted. And in the UTRGV's textbook, chapter 8.4, Romantic Relationships, we learned about how communication, love, and cultural influence all impact relationships, especially now when everything happens on screens.
Moving on to segment 8, final thoughts and why this matters. We chose this topic because dating affects everyone, and we think people our age are struggling to understand what a healthy relationship even looks like.
It matters because your beliefs about love, trust, gender, and communication come from somewhere. They don't just appear. We wanted to show how history shaped today's chaos.
We also wanted to connect this to themes from class, like media influence and social norms. Those mental hygiene films in the 1940s, that's propaganda through education.
And the shift from traditional to modern roles, that's a perfect example of how changing structures impact personal identity, something we talk about a lot in sociology. So, Christian and I have been dating for a while now, and honestly, doing this project together as a couple made it hit even harder. Because we're not just researching dating culture, we're living it, trying to figure it out in real time.
Yeah, and that's what made the class film we watched, How to Be Popular, 1940s high school dating guy, feel so surreal. Like, it was entertaining, but also kind of wild. The whole idea that you had to ask a girl out by Wednesday, meet her parents immediately, and have her home before 11, it's like a different universe.
Exactly. In one part, Carolyn gets asked out by Wally, and the whole thing is so formal. They plan everything in advance, she introduces him to her parents, and they even plan to raid the icebox afterward. It's cute, but it also shows how tightly scripted those relationships were. According to the narration, nothing is more casual and more fun than raiding the icebox after a date. Like, even fun had rules.
That's why it's so different now. When we started dating, there was no rule book. We didn't follow some checklist from a school film, but we still had to figure out how to communicate, how to be respectful, and how to support each other without falling into the trap of toxic behaviors like ghosting or breadcrumbing, which are sadly common now.
Exactly. And what we've realized is that even though dating looks different now, the core values that made relationships strong back then, respect, clear communication, and thoughtfulness, still matter. We just have to apply them differently. For example, Wally in the film thinks about what Caroline might enjoy before asking her out, which is actually sweet and thoughtful.
Honestly, doing this podcast together made me appreciate our relationship more. It helped me see that we're building our own script, and that's okay. Like the Psychology Today article said, people today either stick to old norms or create their own path, and we're trying to do the latter, but with intention and love.
So, something we didn't expect when we started this project is how personal it would feel. I mean, we thought we'd just be reporting on history, but being in a relationship while studying dating culture made it emotional too.
Yeah, reading about all the expectations from the 1940s and 50s made us think, what expectations are we carrying now, even if we don't realize it? For example, one article from Our Everyday Life explained how women back then were seen as helpers to their husband. That really stuck with us.
Right, and even though things are more equal now, there's still this pressure. Like, women still feel expected to be emotionally mature and nurturing, while guys are supposed to be chill and not too emotional. And that gets exhausting. We've had to talk a lot about those kinds of things, especially when we misunderstood each other.
Exactly. In the 1940s, the rules were clear, even if they were restrictive. But now, there's freedom, sure, but also confusion. The Psychology Today article on script theory explained this perfectly. In modern culture, people are trying to figure out their own relationship scripts, but there's no standard anymore.
That's where trust and communication come in. And honestly, dating each other while doing this project helped us notice our own habits. Like, are we being honest when we feel jealous or insecure? Are we being emotionally available? Those aren't things Wally and Caroline were expected to talk about back then, but for us, they matter a lot.
There's also the digital side. According to the Pew Research Center, 23% of partnered people feel jealous or uncertain about the relationship because of their partner's interactions on social media. That's not something couples in the 1940s had to deal with. We've had to talk about stuff like this Like what's okay to like or comment on. It sounds silly, but it's real.
Yeah, social media is like a third person in some relationships now. That's why we're both trying to be mindful, not just with what we post, but how we show up for each other in person. We don't want to be the couple that looks perfect online but doesn't communicate offline.
And I think that's the biggest thing we've learned. Love has to be intentional. It's not just about chemistry or vibes. It's about choosing each other daily, being present, and respecting the past without being trapped by it. So, moving on to segment 9, what we learned. I learned that there's no one right way to date, but you have to be intentional. Whether you follow a traditional path or build your own, honesty and communication are everything.
Same. I also realized that we're still dealing with a lot of pressure from past generations, just in new forms. Whether it's Instagram likes or body image or hookup culture, dating today is still shaped by what came before. Thanks for listening to our podcast. We hope this episode helps you understand dating in a whole new way, from 1900s to courtship to Tinder and beyond.
Thank you for the amazing semester. Goodbye.
Goodbye.